Welcome back to another Wright Stew Podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
And I am Brian Wright, and we are on the best day of the week, Monday. We made it. We made it.
We're back. I'm back in the speaker studio. All is right in the world. Spend a little time in Star Wars studio. Enjoy my time there, but enjoy the comfort of this chair and being back with you, Brian, for another fun and exciting week. So we've got so Monday is our weekly segment. It's the athlete you should know. And so the one we're going to talk about today, as we move into March, we're going to talk a little more college basketball, right? It makes a whole lot of sense. But the guy we're going to talk about today had a really big impact and was a great high school, really good college, and then the NBA career didn't work out as well. So we're going to talk about a guy named Dajuan Wagner, Brian. Do you remember Dajuan Wagner coming up as a big time kind of prospect, big time player?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
No. And again, it's not, obviously we've talked about this in advance, and we had a couple of guys that we had talked about maybe doing this with or whatever. But when you said his name, he could have been my mailman. I would have had no idea.
Okay. So Dajuan Wagner, son of Milt Wagner, who actually played in Louisville, was part of the 87-88 LA Lakers team that won the NBA title. But Dajuan played in Camden, New Jersey, was a huge mega prospect, kind of a 6'1" shooting guard, ran the point a little bit, but not a giant player like we think of basketball. Scored 100 points in a high school game at one point.
I wonder if the game was close.
I think it was much closer. I think it was a more competitive game than the one we talked about earlier in the year. I think they were facing some pretty good talent there in Camden, New Jersey. But so Wagner, clearly really good player. His senior year averaged 33.1 points a game, was McDonald's All-American. Yeah, was the real deal, right? Was a highly sought after recruit. So had offers and kind of narrowed it down to Connecticut, Kentucky, Louisville, Memphis, and Miami. Those are pretty big time teams at the time. He chose Memphis, right? Wanted to go play for Coach Calipari. And then played 1 year at Memphis. His freshman year averaged 21.2 points a game, 3.8 assists, 3.1 rebounds. And then what happened next, Brian, was what was really fascinating. Coach Calipari, after his freshman year, said, Dajuan, I love you, but you're not coming back here. He literally tore up his contract, I guess, his scholarship contract, and said, you're not going to play at Memphis. You are going to the NBA draft. And he forced him to go to the draft. And we'll touch base on this. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more, but we'll come back to this because it's very important. So Dajuan Wagner gets drafted sixth overall in the following year's draft in 2000. Was it 2002, right? Pretty good. The next year, the Cavaliers drafted somebody by the name of LeBron James. Pretty big deal. So LeBron and Dajuan Wagner were kind of supposed to be the 1-2 combo and kind of play beside each other for a long time. But what happened was Dajuan Wagner started having some health issues. He had ulcerative colitis, which is I didn't know a whole lot about, but it's a colon issue. He eventually got his colon removed and had a fake colon put in. A different colon.
I didn't know that was possible.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm learning a lot. But so ulcerative colitis, I've seen some things online. Apparently, it's no joke. Like it's debilitating. Like you can barely live normal life, let alone the life of an NBA player, like a highly tuned athlete. So that just it literally had forced him to sit out some time, and he tried to make a comeback in a Polish league, didn't work out, just couldn't do it. So he's moved on in life. He's done pretty well. So he made a little over $8 million during his playing career, right? That was his salary. And clearly you don't get all $8 million. You're paying your taxes, your agents, and things like that, right? But made some decent money. His son, Dajuan Wagner Jr., DJ, he is now a big-time college basketball player. He went to Kentucky. Now he's at Arkansas, where Coach Calipari is. So Coach Cal keeps a lot of stuff in the family. But what I want to talk to you about, Brian, and what's really important about this athlete specifically, and it's a little bit of him and a little bit of Coach Cal. Coach Cal, and I've seen him do interviews, and I couldn't find the interview. I looked for it, but he said, "Had I been selfish and kept Dajuan at Kentucky, or excuse me, at Memphis, he would have gotten ulcerative colitis either as sophomore or junior year. We would have diagnosed it. He wouldn't have been able to play." And then he said, "An education from a college or Kentucky is great, right? It's not going to pay $8 million in a couple of years." And so that's kind of where I want to get. So Dajuan Wagner, great player, huge potential, didn't work out because of just this really random kind of thing that happened to him. But what I want to hear kind of your thoughts and opinions and kind of talk through is Coach Cal did the right thing for the young man. He said, "Hey, go make some money." Like, and he says, "Look, if had I kept him here and been selfish and did what a lot of people want to do, and where's he at?" You know?
Well, it's funny how Coach Calipari, how his perception has changed over the years.
Yeah.
Like for a long period of time, he was kind of the used car salesman that was at universities that could bend kind of grades. He was at UMass, he was at Memphis, not real stiff academic institutions, and he was kind of considered slimy for a long time. Even me, as a I'm not a real basketball fan when you compare me to a lot of people, especially college basketball, when the guys can spit out stats and different things. But I can remember thinking he feels like a used car salesman. When he would do all these interviews, he was much more in front of the camera. He may have been ahead of the game because eventually got him the job at Kentucky. But he was much more comfortable in front of the camera and being able to say the right things in front of the camera that I think did help him get players. Clearly, he gets credit in that situation if that's really how it went down. And it may have. That may be absolutely how it went down.
I've heard it from other sources as well, yeah.
So, sometimes, if that's how it went down, good for him. I mean, that's what you would hope coaches do. You heard about Dean Smith back in his day. He would call scouts for guys and make sure that, he would, hey, what do you see this guy being? Is he really a lottery pick? I don't, he can come out early, and guys were staying at least to their junior year then a lot of times. But even after him, Roy Williams was the same way. Guys that are in that, in the long run, it's the best thing for your program because you got great players coming in after. And not to be cynical, but Memphis, I don't think they ever did win it. But man, they
got to the final. They got to the final the one year against Kansas, and was it Mario Chalmers hit that shot? The Derrick Rose team that Memphis had. I mean, Coach Cal was bringing in some players, right? Derrick Rose.
Well, you remember Derrick Rose was one of those guys. They eventually thought he did not take his SAT. Like if you went back and looked,
there was some trouble there. And then, but even Memphis before Coach Cal got there, Anthony Hardaway was there. Penny Hardaway, right in the mid '90s or early '90s, and was legit. Again, injuries kind of derailed. He was a generational NBA talent. That was
and he's coaching there now. Having success. It's weird because if you've been to Memphis is awesome during the daylight in certain parts of the town. But dude, there are some real rough parts of the town. We've got some friends of ours whose kids go to Rhodes and some really nice, supposed to be academic institutions. And dude, it can get really scary in certain situations. And I'm not saying that's not the case in a lot of cities, but I went to NC State and Raleigh. There were most places you felt comfortable doing
pretty safe.
And even now, there's most places I feel okay. Now, I'm not walking alone or want one of my daughters to, but Memphis, you're having to sell something there that maybe you're not selling at UNC, you're not selling at Duke, and clearly they're doing a really good job of doing it.
Yeah. And so, Brian, I've always been on the side of upward mobility, freedom for players. Again, and I think it goes back to my personal story, right? Being drafted out of high school and having a chance to go play in college, and then legitimately part of the decision was I wanted to play in the big leagues, and I wanted to try to do that sooner. And I thought signing out of high school would be, but some of it was they threw a bunch of money at me. That's a pretty kind of weird thing to do as a 17-year-old, right? See that, and And again, Dajuan Wagner, very young, had a lot of money thrown at him, and it's like, man, why? How do you pass that up? And again, in any other aspect of life, had Dajuan Wagner been the top lawyer, and some law firm said, you know what, Dajuan, we need you here. Just leave school early. We'll take care of the rest. Nobody's going to argue with that. They'd be proud of him and happy for him. But it's because it's basketball or a sport, right? That people are like, oh, we need our team to win. Like they're looking at for their school, their alma mater. So, and I've tried to look at it from both sides. And if you truly care about the individual, then you're happy for that young man or young woman who goes and succeeds professionally in that sport. A lot of people,
I would argue,
their number one interest is their school.
Oh yeah, for sure, which is natural, right? There's probably only in people's lives, if we're being honest, all love is conditional. There's only probably 2 or 3 people that is not truly unconditional, right? Yeah. Your wife, you have an affair, you beat her, she's not going to love you anymore. Maybe your children, right? Especially when they're young. That's unconditional love towards your children. That's true loyalty, right? That's your true loyalty. Like outside of that, everything else is conditional. Like me and you, right? We're good friends, but if all of a sudden you came over and started throwing rocks in my house, it's going to be hard for me to forgive that, right? And so,
what would you do if I did come over and start throwing rocks at your house?
I think I don't know.
Would you try to talk me down? What
I would want to see your eyes to make sure you're not like a skinwalker or something weird has happened to you. So everything is conditional, and so I was at one time very much like by nature I'm pretty loyal, right? Especially to friends, and I'll give until I can't, and then I'll kind of break away from that situation. And so I would say those guys, every situation. So it's very natural for fans to feel the way they feel. I felt that way when Tommy White went to LSU, right? Initially, it's like, F you, dude, you're going to a better program. And then it's like, well, you're getting all that money. I don't blame you, but I don't wish him the best when he left. It wasn't, I hope you go fail somewhere else was my thought.
And
you should have stayed here with us.
Title. So for folks out there, so Tommy White was is a college baseball player.
No. He got drafted. He's drafted.
Yeah, so college baseball player, went to his freshman year at NC State, set the national record for freshman. Hit like 27 home runs his freshman year. Set the national record for home runs by a freshman ever of all time. So, and then next thing you know, he's at LSU and making a lot of money there. And I think it was junior year he won the national title at LSU, I believe. Maybe he was a sophomore, maybe a junior, but they won a national title when he was there. So.
Yeah, dude, it's obviously a good decision for him.
Yeah,
it's a terrible decision for NC State, right? I mean, so it's okay. I think it's okay not to wish them the best, but it's also okay. And maybe I keep telling you, Paul, you're a better person because I don't wish people the best that are really sticking it to the team that I'm pulling for. Yeah. But on the flip side, but I understand why they make that decision, right?
Well, I did, and I saw a statistic today, and it was more like the professional career stuff, and along the same line, it said, people who bounce around, change jobs every 2 to 4 years, on average, make over a career 50% more than people who stay loyal to an organization or to a job, right? And you and I are cut from the same cloth, man. We're probably loyal to a fault. We want to do the right thing by the people who we work with, who are associated with, we're employed by, sort of thing. And you see that and you're like, gosh, have I missed out on some money, or have I missed out on some things? And maybe,
well, I think,
I don't know. I'm not always a grass is greener guy. I feel like I've been burned too much by that, and so I prefer the kind of the poison I know, I guess, right?
That's fair. I would say it's I think it's different for a lot of people. Obviously, your stats, there's something to those stats. Sometimes you can make them look how you want them to look. But I'd say, the reality is the loyalty is dictated, especially us being in sales and doing that sort of thing. It's really about how much you produce or whatever your team produces if you're in a leadership role. So, again, very conditional type relationships. And so as long as you always know what those conditions are, right, and you're okay with it, and then that's just kind of how how it is. So essentially, all we're doing is trading time for money,
Yeah.
and that's a hard thing to somebody who's more loyal by nature, right? I think initially I was, looking for that perfect thing, and it took, I don't know if you ever find that perfect job. You try to find people you like to work with and enjoy being around and feel like they're honest, and that's essentially what any of these relationships are. Now in sport it's different. In college sports it's totally changed. Paul, if you had your son, or if you were coming up now and you could go get drafted and say they offered you 250, but you could go to LSU and they were going to pay you, or South Carolina, which was a real opportunity, and they were going to pay you 200. You have a much more difficult decision to make, right? Because then you're like, I could be a second round pick and I could get $2 million in 3 years, right? And I could make $200,000 every year, or $100,000. And so
college, man, college is much more enticing now, but there's still I feel like when you get drafted and you're playing pro ball, like you're going to get your reps. You're going to be a starter. You're going to be in the bullpen. You're going to get at bats. Whereas college, you come in as a freshman, you're fighting for time again. Unless you're an absolute stud, you're back to fighting for time. You're playing with guys who are 4, 5, now even 6 years older than you now because of some different, scenarios. And it's like, as an 18-year-old, it's tough to match up with a 24-year-old.
Oh, right? I don't disagree with you.
And those college coaches, they need to win now.
Yeah.
It's not about development. They tell you it's about development. And I think there is an aspect of development.
And I think certain programs
but that's on the back burner, right? That is slowly happening. But winning needs to happen now because that dictates how much they get paid, what kind of other contracts you get with bat companies, or depending on whatever sport you are, right? So they need to win now. So yeah, you're right though, Brian. If you're a big time prospect and not a super high round pick, man, there's real money to be made at some of these colleges.
And I think that's the route. I think that's the route people are going to take now, because you can go and make really good money and you mature a little bit. And if you're really a guy, you're still going to be a guy in 3 years. A pitcher may be different. I look at it from a position player.
Yeah,
a pitcher, you could say you only got so many bullets in the elbow. But I would say it would be very tempting to go. And I saw, Paulie, what I saw when I was drafted and I saw high school kids come in, I didn't see lack of talent. I saw lack of emotional and mental maturity as the
discipline,
hemorrhage.
Things like that, yeah.
And so I think that's something that really you can develop and essentially you should get to play longer, because if you're good enough, right, you're still going to get drafted again. But I would argue most of the guys that are starting at these D1 places, at the LSUs, the Clemsons, all these, they were probably would have been, could have been, or were draft picks in high school if they're playing as freshmen and decided to go to college. I don't think there's many guys that are playing that weren't on somebody's list at some point in time.
They were on the radar, yeah. And kind of to tie it back and put a bow on it with Dajuan Wagner, that was part of my decision-making process as well, to sign in pro ball. Like, I had some other factors, and we've talked about that. But like you said, bullets in the arm, like, hey, I could go to NC State or South Carolina. I could throw my first pitch on campus, blow my elbow out, and never be the same. And then, again, a college degree is great. It's fine. But I wouldn't have that big lump sum of money in my banking account, right?
Right.
So that was the decision. So the athlete you should know this week, Dajuan Wagner, a little more on the radar. He was a 6th overall pick, but didn't ultimately pan out how people thought he should, right? But extenuating circumstances. So as you're in the office, as you're talking to folks, ask them about Dajuan Wagner. Bring up that conversation. See what people think about one and dones, leaving early. So I think it's an interesting conversation, and it kind of shows where people are, I think.
Well, I think it is generational too. I think we're probably at the top end, or maybe we're right in the middle. There's definitely a generation older than us, 55, generation above us that want to see guys stay in college.
Oh, loyal.
And then the generation below us, and we see it, right, with all travel team kids and switching every 6 months, different team, that there's no loyalty. So it starts really early. I would say I need to give credit where credit is due. I know I was hating on Calipari earlier. I mean, obviously, a lot of credit if that was how the conversation went. Hey, I'm tearing this up. You need to go get drafted. You made the guy $8 million, and he eventually rewarded Calipari by his son going to wherever he was coaching at whenever his son was available too.
Yeah.
So it came full circle.
Yeah, and Coach Cal, and we saw Coach Cal at the John Wall tournament. Back in December when my son and I went. I was kind of excited to see him. Like that was a pretty big deal. And you see, man, and you heard some of those rumblings at Kentucky. It was like, well, or he wasn't winning national titles. He won one, but he wasn't winning titles, right? Plural. But he was putting guys in the NBA. He had a lot of first round picks. But the Kentucky fans were like, ooh, we're not cheering for the Lakers. We're not cheering for the Hornets. We're cheering for the Kentucky Wildcats. Let's win some games here. Let's do it here. And so it became, and I get it, as if you're a booster or donate money or a fanatic, right? You want to see your team win games, and you get selfish and you want to see them stick around. And Coach Cal just had I think bigger picture in mind, and you see some of those things where like the guys are so loyal to him and love him so much, and you can see why, man. He gets them prepared and gets them ready, and he's had a lot of guys that have had a lot of success and made a lot of money. And it's not all Coach Cal, right? Clearly, they're very talented at what they do, but he was a guy who guided him along, gave him sage advice, and treated him the right way. So,
well, I think he was doing what he had to do. I could argue he was doing what he had to do at the right time. He was an early adopter of the one and done and embraced that as a way to build a program. Very challenging to win it all. Can be very competitive and have a lot of high draft picks, but he embraced that different model than what UNC and even Duke. Coach K at one time was kind of one and done.
Coach K dove into it though. He started,
and then eventually he did. He did, but initially he was resistant. Obviously, Roy and Coach Dean Smith was against it to start with.
Oh yeah. Well, he was kind of before that a little bit, but. And realistically, when we say one and done, people get so worked up. I don't have the number in front of me. There's, I would assume, a few thousand D1 basketball players. Yeah, and then at all levels of college basketball, more thousands of. When we say one and done, we're talking about like 5 or 6 guys. And we're not talking like. The guy that's starting at Hofstra or even NC State, right? Well, I guess they had one recently, but we're not talking about. We're talking about a couple guys at Duke, a couple guys at Kentucky, a couple guys. No,
you're absolutely right.
Right.
What you see at Hofstra is that guy Hofstra has a good year and he goes and plays for another level up. He's one and done on to the next program.
Yeah. So Brian, we both got a chance to watch the Clemson South Carolina baseball game today, and saw an odd play, and wanted to walk through it and get your thoughts on it. I've got my thoughts on it. So here, situation: we had one out. South Carolina is hitting, runners on first and second. Guy hits a chopper up the middle. The second baseman fields it, runs, tags the bag. The runner from first base slides in early, goes through the bag, but slides through the bag, and the guy has to jump over him. The ball is thrown errantly. The first baseman misses it. It ricochets back pretty quick. The first baseman grabs it. The guy who hit the ball made his turn and kept going to second base on the overthrow. First baseman throws the ball to second, but the guy who had slid in originally didn't get out of the way. He kind of started walking off and then came back and just dropped to the ground, covered his head like there was a grenade or something in the area. The shortstop tries to catch the ball but misses it. Looks like he should have caught. Looks like he just missed it. He should have caught that ball. But ball tips off his glove. The guy who hit the ball slides in and is safe, but the umpire says, no interference. You're out. So he called interference on the original guy who slid into the bag. And then both coaches are arguing at the same time with 2 different umpires, and the crowd's going crazy, and they end up reviewing it. So in the meantime, the guy who was on second comes around and scores. And so initially we thought it was going to be a run that counted there, but took the run off the board, called the guy out on a double play, and that was just a wild. Brian, what was going through that run? The original runner who slid it. Why did he not get out of the way?
I have no idea. And even more weird, they came back on and put the run back on the board. After the review, they put the run back on the board. Still called the runner out. And it made no sense. That was their second run. It was 4-2.
So they did keep the runner. Okay, they did keep the runner.
Yeah, originally they took it off. They took off the
Yeah.
runner. They went in the review. I'm still confused. I'm not sure why the guy was there. You see him stand up and like kind of get out of the way, and he's like, I don't know. It's just like he became a fan, and he was in the middle of the action, didn't realize there was a throw. So the shortstop's kind of breaking back over. He realized he could be in the way. He drops to make sure he's out of the way, and he wasn't in the way. I still don't think it should have been interference on it. He should have been. It was just a lot of dumbness. And I've literally watched baseball for 40 years, and I've never seen a play like that. And I don't think it was called correctly, but it was so stupid. I was okay with it being the way it was called.
Yeah, and I understand because the umpire was he was in the grass, so I think
he thought his feet called.
From his angle, it looked like he might have bumped into the shortstop. But again, they went and looked at the replay, and I think the view from the outfield showed that
there was 2 or 3 feet.
I don't
he wasn't
think
in
there
the
was
way.
Contact, but maybe the interpretation was he made the shortstop, reroute his path or whatever it might have been to where he would have been. I don't know if it was the right call. That's the call. I'm on the same page as you. The guy who slid in to break up the double play, you could have gone about 50 different directions to get out of the way, and you chose to go. You were heading the right. Then you just stopped and stayed in the. What are you doing, guy?
And it collapsed.
And then he fell to the ground and covered his head, which was we were watching as a family. My daughter was like, "What did he cover his head for? He's got a helmet on." Like, what are you doing?
I don't know. Paulo, the only thing I can think of is he became a fan, and he thought the ball was on the way. But like you said, there's 50 other things he could have done to get out of the way. And the other thing I can think of is there a rule that after you are out, you have to immediately exit the field? Is there any kind of rule that they could have pulled from there?
There's got to be one where you have to be you have to move in a timely manner. You can't just hang out on the base.
So I think they may have instituted that because he was still kind of in the action area. But I was okay with the call because it was such a stupid. And you see him in the dugout trying to explain to his team.
Nobody wanted to hear it.
Nobody wanted to hear it. You can tell they're like, dude, what are you talking about?
Just get off just stop talking. He had the big eyes and he was like very animated, trying to here's what and like nobody was sympathizing with him. They're just stop being stupid. Do you recall or do you have any kind of memories of a play that you did where you just brain farted or anything where you're
when I was a freshman and sophomore in college, I was a terrible base runner. And I hit doubles and hit home runs in high school. I may have stole some bases, but and then you get to college and guys their feet can really move and
they can throw the ball,
yeah, and they can still throw the ball where I was from, but their feet really could move better, right? And they're picking you off and especially from a pitcher standpoint, right? And I imagine you had good feet to pick guys off. And so I got picked off a couple of times. I mean, just feel like the biggest loser. Definitely, I've never been taught, right? You'd always, and I think this is a terrible way to do it. You'd always been taught, listen to your base coaches. Well, no, you don't listen to your base coaches.
By the time you hear that, it's already too late.
Yeah. The way it should have been taught by the time kids are in high school is if you're on first base, you can see if the ball's in front of you, you go first or third. And if the ball's behind you, then you're looking at your third base coach. Or if you're second and the ball's hitting a certain place, you may look up and see where you need to go. I was just so behind base running wise, from stealing bases to getting leads to knowing that it's on me to decide if I'm getting a double, single, triple, and how to do that stuff, that there was a learning curve, and it probably took me longer than I should have.
Well, that's one of the things that we focus on a lot with our boys is most practices we open with some sort of base running drill or base running thing, and a lot of it's redundant, but it's like we have to do this. Like this needs to be drilled. This needs to be just second nature for you. And so that's part of why we do it. And again, I talked to a lot of college coaches during my daughter's recruiting process, both of them, and they typically say base running is one of the things that people are the worst at. And so I try to put a big focus and emphasis on, and again, teaching when I'm coaching first and you're coaching third, hey guys, take a look at where the outfielders are. Yeah. If the ball's hitting different places, so you have an idea, right? If they're shallow, deep, and we typically don't have like scout. We don't know whose arms are better or worse, but you can kind of make some assumptions. You can kind of see them play catch. But so we're trying to drill that into our heads. I can't recall anything that I'm sure I did some. I can't anything off the top of my head. I do remember my first go in Double A when pitchers were still hitting. I was up and it was a bunting situation. There's one out, runner on first, and I'm up there hitting. Oh, the coach gives me the no, there's 2 outs. I'm sorry, it's 2 outs. Coach gives me the bunt sign, and I'm like, what the? And so I take it for strike one. I mean, there's 2 outs. Why did he give me the bunt sign? And then so next time he gives me like really emphatically like gives me the bunt sign. I'm like, I'm like, I don't think I know the signs. And I take strike 2. And then
he saw you hit BP.
Well, yeah, right. And then I step out of the box and I look down. He goes, bunt the ball. And I kind of point to the scoreboard and I give him the number 2. He goes, oh, swing away. I'm like, yeah. And it was, I remember it was, we were playing the Braves. It was, you remember Jason Marquis?
Yeah.
He was pitching, and it's like, all right. So he throws me a fastball. I hit a ground ball. Hit it pretty hard, actually. Sandbat was using one of my sandbats. Hit a ground ball to first base and grounded out. But yes, I remember he brain farted on that one. But I'll have to think back to an embarrassing time I did something stupid. I'm sure there's plenty of them. But man, well, hey, thank you all for listening today. We appreciate it. Hey, make sure you're subscribing, liking, follow us on all the socials, and hey, go out there and have an amazing week.
Out, go Pack. 6-5.